Hello. Um, my name is Guha, and this is my first build ever. Actually, I just joined Microsoft a few weeks ago after spending 20 plus years, Google, OpenAI, and so on. So thank you for this warm welcome. So we're going to talk to you today about NLWeb. I'm going to talk about what is NLWeb, why do we think we need it, what's the value. We're going to show you some demos and then get into how you might actually build yours. So there's so many times you go to a site. Let me give you a couple of personal examples. A few years ago, I was at one of these vacation rental sites, and we were looking for a place that was on the beach, not like near the beach, but on the beach, about less than 2 hours drive away from the San Francisco Bay Area where we live. There is no way to do that query on that site. It's not that they didn't have the data. They had the data. Or a friend who had moved from a different part of the country to the Bay Area wanted something in the gun school district with a pool and a backyard because he has a large dog. The database for the real estate company has the data. There's just no way to get at it because the person designing the site did not think this kind of a thing would be one of the common queries. And yet, with natural language, we can communicate this so easily. Now, this vision of being able to just talk to applications was an old one. It's been there since at least since the late 80s when I got into AI. And if you look at the first edition of Bill Gates' Information Superhighway book in 93 or 94, he talks about this a lot. It was just technically just incredibly hard to build. When ChatGPT showed up about 2.5 years ago now, a lot of us thought that in short order, the 200 million or so sites that are active would have this kind of an interface. And out of the 200 million today, there's exactly 4 where you can have a conversation, 4 or maybe 5, ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Cohere, and maybe a couple, Gemini, and so on. What about the rest? NLWeb is about bringing this kind of a conversational interface to the rest. Today, even if you are willing to use the OpenAI APIs and so on, the first step in going and building a natural language interface like that on your data is to go hire 5 AI engineers, which we know is incredibly difficult. So let me get it deeper into what is NLWeb. There's two distinct parts of it. I come from an incredibly I'm old, and I believed, I grew up in the web at the time when it had to be open. So I did a few things, like I created this standard called RDF, I created RSS, I created schema.org, and all of these things are incredibly open. And to me, this would have been a travesty if this thing were closed, if you had to go to only one company to go get this thing. And so the reason I came here is because Satya and Kevin convinced me that Microsoft wanted this to be open. Open, so there are really 2 distinct things that are involved here. One is, in a world, open means you should be able to build these. We'd like it if you did it on Azure, but if you wanted to do it on a different cloud, that's fine, and Jennifer will show it to you running on her laptop. It would be nice if you use the models hosted on Azure, but if you don't want to, that's fine. If you would like to use Quadrant, as she's going to use, or Elastic, or Snowflake, that should be fine. Now, when we have so many different agents operating across these different things, because each of these things becomes an agent, we want these things to be able to talk to each other. And for that, we need an interoperability layer. Today, you can use pretty much any browser and use any website, right? That's because there's that interoperability layer. But you can't take an app made for an iPhone and run it on an Android. You can't have a Teams meeting with somebody on Zoom. Those things are silos, those things are islands. We don't want that over here. So one part of it is a protocol layer for protocols and formats. And as Kevin explained, MCP provides the HTTP equivalent, and we're going to provide the HTML equivalent. Now, all that theory is fine. We want to give you a very simple way. And here's one way, not the way. We expect WordPress and Shopify and every one of the big platform providers who host these 200 million sites to be able to provide their own way, possibly using our stack, of providing an NLWeb interface. But there has to be a starting point. A theory of how the web should be existed since Nelson did Xanadu. It required Tim Berners-Lee and then Mark Andreessen to come and say, here is an incredibly simple way of doing it. It does work. You put your documents in this format called HTML, and you put it in this folder called htdocs. In fact, it was so simple that Tim Berners-Lee's first paper to the HTML conference on how to build this web was rejected because it was too simple, right? You need that level of simplicity. It needs to kind of work, and it needs to be open so that it can be iterated upon. How are we going to do this? One of the things that has happened is, if you're all familiar with the idea of there's a database at the back, you do some kind of put it into some kind of a vector embedding, you retrieve from it, and then you throw it into some LLM, and there's a bunch of tricks over there, and then you give the user the natural language interface. But the web is not a database, but most of big websites are run powered by databases. And one of the interesting things that has happened is that over the years, both RSS and schema.org and so on have become widely adopted. The other really, schema.org is in use by over 50, 70 million sites today of the 200 million. And the funny thing is that these LLMs understand schema.org that well because it's all in the training data that they've been trained on. So we leverage that to enable you to create these natural language interfaces incredibly easily. But this is not the only way you can do it. There may be other ways to do it. There may be smarter ways to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to kind of motivate this stuff, a lot of this talk is going to be on how are you going to build it. And we don't have anything to do afterwards. And so we'll be around for asking questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer, who is going to actually build one of these beasts, right? Oh, no, she's going to show you some demos. We started working with Common Sense Media.
Yeah.
The VP of brand at Common Sense Media is an old friend of mine who worked with me at Google, and so I saw some LinkedIn post, pinged her. She saw a demo. She got excited, and they started actually trying to do this less than a week ago.
Yep.
And
let me run it. I actually have a 10-year-old. So one of the queries that I had, one of the great things about Common Sense Media is that they provide information on what is the right kind of level of content for my child. And so I could ask a query like, hey, I want a set of books that's going to keep my 10-year-old occupied and off screens for the summer, because summer vacation is coming up very soon. And you can see it comes back with some really great things. If you look at these descriptions, they're all books,
just let me interrupt.
All contextual.
If you look at the URL, that thing is running on a local machine. That's how fast it is. And it's really live. It's actually running that and doing that. And it's talking to, I don't know whose model she's talking to. But
it was that one I think was run against the Azure OpenAI service.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Using GPT-4.1. And now I can actually continue to iterate on that. So I can refine my query, say, well, he really likes Minecraft and soccer. And notice right there, Minecraft the Island shows up as another great option for him to read. And then there's other things that kind of bring in, like the dangerous book for boys. So they kind of figuring the semantic understanding of that a boy that is really into soccer and Minecraft would probably like this thing about doing kind of fun outdoor stuff as well. And then we also we want to give him stories with strong boy role models, and notice that it kind of brings together all of those things I've said so far to give me suggestions for books about amazing boys who change the world without killing dragons and other things, warrior challenges and stuff like that. All things that I think my son would absolutely love. So really, really great implementation that, again, as Guha said, we were able to get working very, very quickly because of the ease of this. But don't take my word for it. Let's actually do it right now so I can show you exactly how easy this is. So let me jump over to my machine. Can you guys see it okay? Yes, okay. So now, first thing to know is our website. So all of this, as Guha said, is completely open. So you can go to github.com/Microsoft/NLWeb and be able to try all of this like right after this talk. It's all out there right now.
A lot of open source projects now are like completely done, polished, beautiful, and so on. And then there are others where you go like, what the hell are these people thinking? This is more in the latter category. And because we've already received a bunch of PRs, which are mostly cleaning up things that we've left behind there. Okay?
Yeah.
This is exactly what we want.
Yes. And it's lovely, like it's actually really great. Like when I contribute to open source, it's really nice to know that it's something where like contributions are welcome. So let me echo Guha, contributions are welcome. All right, so what I'm gonna do first is just start the web server and prove to you that this is not smoke and mirrors. I literally have nothing in my database. So I'm gonna kick off our web server. So to do that, there is a little bit of work that I did in advance. I did create an environment and activated my environment. This is some logger stuff. I know it's scary to see error so much at the beginning, but all that's saying is it's only logging errors. It's not doing the debug and stuff like that. We'll get that cleaned up as well. But then what we'll do is host this on my local host, as we see right here. So now if I jump over to my local host, I will refresh this just to make sure I'm grabbing the latest. And I'm going to look for behind the tech data from in that what we're calling a site collection. I'll show you that in a second. And as Guha said, I'm going to be using the local quadrant database here.
Behind the Tech is Kevin Scott's podcast.
Yes, so Behind the Tech is Kevin's podcast. So what I could ask is, what are some book authors Kevin has had on his podcast? Something like that. And what I should get is no results were found because it is an empty database right now. I don't have any behind the tech information loaded. So what I am going to do is actually navigate here and grab the RSS feed to his podcast. So I'm just going to straight from the site copy an RSS feed, and I want you to go do this after this session with any RSS feed you want and kind of see the how easy it is. And then I'm going to come back here. I'm going to kill my web server for a second, Control-C a couple times. And then I'm going to do Python/m db_load, and then I'm going to paste.
Tools.db.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yes, tools. Sorry. So what I'm in the code directory right now, so I need to go down into my tools directory. Thank you. And then RSS feed. Behind.
Well, she's doing that. So we made it so that we assume that a lot of you will have not a single monolithic collection, but sub collections coming from a web background. I call it a site, and so.
Yeah. So what I'm doing here with this last parameter, so I just pasted in the RSS feed, and then you're giving it, as Guha said, a site name is what we're calling it in the code. So that's kind of a collection, a label that I can apply to this group of data. So I'm going to hit enter on that. And then it's doing a couple of things right now. It actually is going out to that RSS feed, extracting the data, creating embeddings for that data, and then importing those embeddings into a local quadrant vector database. And I'm going to show you where you can swap out those things later because you can write it to different databases and stuff. All right, so now we have actually done it. So I'm going to go back and restart up my web server. And then once that is running again, I'm going to flip back over here and use the exact same query that I was using before. And go right here. We can do a refresh, behind the tech, and quadrant, and ask the exact same thing. What book authors has Kevin Scott had on the Behind the Tech podcast? And woohoo! That easily, we were able to just take a random RSS feed and we have NLWeb enabled it. So now we can chat with a conversational interface with this data. And then what makes that even cooler, what makes that even cooler is the fact that we've created a model context protocol endpoint for any of these NLWeb things. So now what you have is the ability to agent agentify anything here that you've done. So it is fast and easy to now create an agent that can talk to this data because it's all exposed via MCP as well.
So, of course, we don't expect most real deployments to go load a single RSS feed, et cetera. What you will do is you will connect it up to your large vector database. So the TripAdvisor demo that you saw this morning on screen was connected up to their vector database. I don't know which brand they use, but whatever. And then we'll call you, there's a config setting where you specify what models, and then boom, you're off. And assuming it's your sort of your production vector database, which has your most recent products, whatever, it is your live thing, right? And people can come to your site and start talking about to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in terms of the results that you get, and in terms of like, there's an enormous number of ways in which you can tune everything. You can tune the ranking, you can tune the nature of the responses, you can tune all of this stuff. And of course, you can tune the UI completely, because what you have, actually, if you go back to that previous.
Sure. Back to the example that I was showing, the code?
Yes.
Yeah.
This one here, if you go to the top curly bracket. Right, curly. Right.
Sorry, the top result or the
no,
which
no.
one?
The.
You at the debug interface?
This one here.
Oh, got it. Here we go.
So what is actually happening is that, you remember I said we want to standardize the interface? There's an API call that comes in, and it's not a bespoke API per application. This is the key thing over here. It's one API, which is a natural language. And the results that are returned are a combination of structured stuff. And if you see the schema object over there, go a little bit up.
Sorry, do you want me to go back up?
Yeah, there.
Schema object.
Schema object. So this is the original object that came from the database. So you know there is no hallucination. You're giving me the object that you, and it's like, it may be slightly irrelevant. Maybe that's not the best result, but it'll never make up an answer.
Yeah.
And you can ask it to do further processing on top of that, and so on and so forth. And this is the layer that we want to standardize, so that it doesn't matter whether you're running on whose ever platform, all of these things can talk to each other.
Yes. Awesome. Okay, so let's kind of explore a little bit more deeply what actually is happening under the covers.
So this is now about this particular implementation. And I hope that this implementation that we are putting out there becomes about as relevant to the web as, NCSA, HTTPD, and Apache were in the 90s, and they're not relevant anymore. Things have gone a lot farther. We expect that to happen. We want that to happen. But it's a good idea to understand what is happening, because you start iterating from that.
Right. So in the implementation that we have out on the GitHub repo today, one implementation of this protocol is, this is exactly what's kind of happening under the covers, just to understand it a little better. For me, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I want to see exactly the data flow of what's happening in the system. So if we look at kind of that first arrow, we have a customer query. So imagine that question about like, what book authors has Kevin had on his podcast is the query that's coming in, right? Then two branches are happening simultaneously. The NLWeb app is actually taking the query and sending it off to the large language model that you've specified in the configuration. And as Guha said, it's completely open, so this could be any large language model that you want. And there's a bunch of stuff happening under the covers right now. There is relevancy, like checks for history. There's some memory work, some decontextualization. So a lot of kind of stuff that's happening there. And then at the same time, we're sending a call to the vector database as well. And what's nice about that call, which is what you see as 2B, the one that's going off to the right-hand side on the slide that you see, what's happening there is a fast track process that happens a little bit more quickly. So you get results back even faster and can actually start on step 3. So it's a great optimization to keep things moving quickly. Then those search results that came back from the vector database, it does some ranking on them, and then an LLM can explain like why it believes the ones that are the best and be able to do some re-ranking. And then once the pre-processing is done and all of the steps are kind of done, it all comes together and does like a final pass on what is the best kind of ranking format. And then that is all returned as kind of step 5 back to the customer, so we get kind of the most highly rated results from all of that.
Let me add a couple of things, and in the meantime, can you switch to the other one?
Please.
To show him summarize?
Yeah. What's that?
Switch to the old one, the Kevin's blog.
Switch to back to the code. Yep.
And
sure.
then run it on summarize.
Yep.
So there's a couple of things over here, which is a lot of this philosophy for this comes it doesn't use RAG. The problem with RAG is that once in 100 times, once in 1,000 times, it'll make up stuff. And if you're selling a product, if you're selling if you're listing hotels, if you're listing attractions, even 1 in 1,000 made up attractions is one too many. So this follows a pattern which is inspired more by search, except it does much, much, much smarter things because it uses LLMs everywhere. It brings in the knowledge of LLMs, it brings in the understanding of LLMs, and so on. Now, it's really up to you. You could leave it at that, or you could have things go on top. So for example, there's another mode over here where it's, in addition to doing all this stuff, it gives you a little summary at the top of the thing, right? And you could do more and more complicated things along those lines. But at its core, it's modeled after search-like things. This instance is modeled after search-like things, which allows us to make for certain fairly strong guarantees about non-hallucination. Now, every once in a while, we've discovered that it can come up with kind of a good story for how it's relevant, but the thing that it's giving you will always exist because it comes with the identifier from your database.
Yeah, so those are both podcasts that Kevin has really truly done. Great, okay. So the next thing, so this is something as the king of open source web standards has said, this is something that we're really all doing as a community. So a huge thank you to all of our early adopters and the collaborators. And if you go look at the repo, you can see some of them already have code checked in. There's more coming. They've not only kind of built things using that and have kind of proof of concepts on their websites, but some of them have already started contributing to the code as well. So we've had some really, really amazing partners, and we truly appreciate every single one of them. What you saw in the keynote this morning was I think 4 of them were shown in Kevin's keynote, so you got to see them. And then I showed the Common Sense Media one at the beginning, and then another one I'd like to show is Delish. So this is another great example of just like the proof of concept that can happen. Oops. This one has audio, whoops. I was using my machine that is very loud. So what you can see here is that there is something that is, I might be looking for something cool and refreshing, like a milkshake. But what if you're lactose intolerant? Are there any alternatives? And so just talking to the website about its data in natural language, it's able to find a number of things. And as you can see from the vegan and dairy-free tags and such that are on here, these things are all correct data.
There's another interesting thing over here. If you look at that UI, it's not a classical chat UI. It's much more like a traditional UI. So we are not going to tell you what your business model should be. If your business model involves sponsored links and so on, should we go back to the grid thing?
Go back to the beginning, or to this?
Yeah, just run that query again.
Okay.
Or some version of the query again.
Yep.
Right? And so you saw the Java JSON structure that is sent back. It can be rendered as you want. And part of the reason for standardizing on those things is that we want to have a really rich library of renderers and this and that and all of those things which take that and do more things, et cetera, to be able to build on top. And you can do that only if you can standardize the semantics of what's coming out there. So this is you can't make out that UI from a traditional UI. It's just that you look at the query and say, how the hell did that search engine work? And you can have a continued conversation in multiple turns and all of that stuff.
That's right. Awesome. So why don't we're all devs in this room, let's dive into some code and actually look at how some of the kind of pieces that can help you be successful on this. So I have kind of a list here of things because I love lists. So we're going to go through, these slides will be made available on the Build website after the talk. And so I tried to give links to all the right files or things that I thought were most important here. So you can peruse these later at your leisure. But these are some of the things that I think are kind of the most important in getting started with the code base. So let's go over back to my machine, and we're going to see kind of some of the things that I think are super important. All right. So now we're back on my machine, and I'm going to show you first how to get our code running locally. So if we come back here to our, at the top level, you can read the README. There's a lot of great information about kind of Guha's vision for this and the information that he kind of already shared with you, and then a bunch of documentation, and we'll continue to add to that documentation and make it even better. Where I suggest you start is the first link under Getting Started, which is Hello World. So if you take a look at this, we go through all the steps of what you need to do. Just cloning the repo, create and activate your environment. Use this command, of course, for Mac and Linux, and this command for Windows. And then go into our code directory, install the requirements. We have a sample environment template with the environment variables that you'll need across all of these model providers. You won't need to fill in values for every single one of them, just the kind of ones that you need. And then copy it into an environment, a .env file, and then you can update just the kind of ones that you need. Then what we're going to do is see the config file. So let me actually show you what we can do with the various things in the config file. So I'm going to jump over to that. Here in the code directory and config, what we have is this config embedding. So by default, there's a provider, and so that's the one that's going to be used by your model. So I can easily change this like from Azure OpenAI to just OpenAI. So select any of the ones that are available here, and you can swap out whatever model you want to use. Now, when it creates the model, it'll look at whatever you've put under provider, and then it will find the right things that it needs to look up. So in this case, it sees that, okay, the environment variable I need for my API key is this, and then my endpoint is this. But I could change this to OpenAI here, and then it would look for these variables, right? Make sense? And then for the model, it specifies a default model that is used. This is for embeddings, so we have embedding models in here. And then it's a very similar concept for the large language model. So this is specifically the model to use for creating embeddings, and this is for the other work that we saw. Guha, did you want to add something?
Yeah, one of the things you might notice is there's a whole bunch of there's a large number of model providers. And there's the usual suspects, and then there's an opportunity here for fine-tuned models. There's an opportunity here for models which have different performance characteristics. So somebody forwarded me this website called Inception Labs. I think folks from there are here, and they are actually, and they had an idea. They incorporated their stuff.
Yeah, there's Inception in the back. Yeah.
You should take a look at the benchmark in the repo. You should look at the benchmark for latency and things like that, because what we're competing with here is search. People come to a search, and Google has set the expectation is search is under 500 milliseconds. You need to be that fast. And if you are that fast, people will go on exploding and exploding and exploding. And so the whole idea is that we want to live in a multi-model world. We don't want model lock-in. In a single call, in a single processing a single query, that thing made 50, 60 calls to models. But if you look at the models that are used, this one is 4.1. 4.0 works just fine. 4.1 mini, right? Very, very cheap. And you can be very fast with these things. And so just wanted to shout out for the Inception guys.
That's
who've
great.
been
Are there
doing
any
great
other
work
people
on
in
the
the room?
benchmarks. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other partners in the room, but like all of the partners were absolutely amazing. Like just so cool. All right, so logging. So this is something that allows you to specify the logging level. So I've actually used this when I knew there was a problem with the webs. So you can set it kind of at the top to the default level. So right now in production, the default settings, of course, are to just log kind of the error level. But if you want, you can switch that over to any of these that you see right here. So debug info, when you're looking for a little bit more information, you can swap it over. Logs are stored to the logs directory. And then I've had issues like, okay, there's something wrong with the web front end. For example, the web server has an error. So I can change this to debug and leave the other ones at error so that like they're not spamming me with their information. I'm just looking at the kind of lower level from the web server. So there's kind of that level of detail there. And then a bunch of other global settings around logging that you can go ahead and tweak, along with kind of the environment variables and such that it's using. So feel free to mess around with these as you're developing to help you implement the best logging. The next thing are the configuration settings that are specific to NLWeb. So there's data folders. So this is where when we kind of saw that process in the keynote this morning, and then again in the demo that I showed earlier, where we were extracting data, creating embeddings, et cetera. Here's the folders where those get put to. You can change those out if you would like to. And then this is what you're going to see later with the MCP work. This is some stuff that we're using to kind of guide the chatbot on how to format it best. So that can also be swapped out if you would like. Next step is the vector database was part of it, right? You remember the life of the query kind of architecture diagram? So one of the other things we have is a vector database or something to do retrieval. Azure AI Search, I actually used to work on that team. I love that service. It's a great service. Quadrant was what I used in the demo earlier. And then we have Snowflake. We have so many great partners, and then hopefully more coming on. There's a PR right now that we're going to get in here. So a whole bunch of great providers for databases here as well. So what this does is the same thing. It'll use whichever one you specify here, and then just to add yourself as an option, you can add a new option available right here as in the list of config things, and then just set like what those should be for your particular service. The next is web server, so some of the very basic web hosting stuff, what port are you on, et cetera, et cetera. There's a development or production mode, and then other kind of random things to get you started there. And then configuration is what sets that. Okay, so that is that. So we can flip back to Hello World, which then pop up the stack. So I just showed you some of these. So these are things that you can change as you want to swap out the LLM you use, the embedding provider that you use, and then your vector database or whatever does retrieval. So choose those, whatever your thing of choice is, feel free to use it. So to get started in the very first Hello World experience, we have an example here just kind of doing the demo that I just did. If you want to load some data in your local vector database, you can do that. So we have some RSS feeds as examples you can use. And then it's not just RSS, like structured data, any structured data will work here that's in the format that's specified.
The bulk of the examples that you saw, and almost all the examples that you saw today, O'Reilly and TripAdvisor and Delish and so on, are not RSS. It's essentially
product catalogs.
This whole thing, by the way, works very well for what are sites which I call item lists. Recipes, products, reviews, podcasts, whatever. And it's a JSON-L file, one line per item, which is a schema.org description, which is typically the one that is found on the web page. And so if you have a vector database and a query comes in, return the answer in a schema.org description, and you can go as rich as you want in a schema.org description, and you don't even need to go through, like one of our partners doesn't even go through an embedding stage externally. They just do stuff inside with it directly. It could be semi-structured. So if I have something like a jacket that costs less than $70, the less than button, which is suitable for springtime Seattle. The suitable for springtime Seattle is all fuzzy stuff, but the less than $70, you might want to extract that out and do that as a hard filter query, right? All of these things are left to the vector database. It's just given a natural language query, give me back a bunch of structured data things. The other interesting thing I should mention when we're talking about retrieval is the output of an NLWeb is the same as the output of a vector database. And in fact, NLWeb cannot distinguish between the two, so you can chain these things and you can stack them up as transformers, like transformers, not transformers, right? And so that is a thing that was not there. So every NLWeb is a built-in aggregator, potentially a built-in aggregator of other NLWebs, which is something that the web architecture didn't have. And I don't know, you might have noticed Satya going on about democratizing and not allowing aggregators. That's what he was referring to, because when you make it that easy to create aggregation points, then aggregation does not become a chokehold on this.
Yeah, great point. So if you want to go through this process and load data yourself, here's the command that you can do. Follow the same thing that I just did in the demo earlier, where we use this DB load tool to be able to load, from example, an RSS feed, and then again, give it a name, so that way if you want to scope your data to just that group of data, you have a nice label for it. So here's the example that I did with Kevin's Behind the Tech podcast. Here's Verge's Decoder podcast as another one. And there's other sources of data here that you're welcome to do. And then kick off your web server and check it out, and it should work. So that's kind of the Hello World process that you can use to get started super easily. We also have,
Can I just say, can you go to that OneDrive folder?
oh, sure, yep.
So either here or some other place, we will keep a list of interesting things that you can play with. This is podcast, but you have O'Reilly schemas. There's a selection of things from TripAdvisor they've made available. There's notable books of science fiction from Wikipedia, same thing from science fiction movies from Wikipedia. If you guys have collections like that, submit it. We'll keep a list. We'll probably move from here, from that OneDrive thing to just having a page on the GitHub with a URL. We would like to create a corpus of open data like this that people can play with.
All right. So let's go back and also look at, there are some good docs that I want to make sure that you see. So on the folder or on the main page, there's a docs folder at the same level as the code folder, so you can go in there and see some of the stuff that already exists. So there are more detailed instructions on the DB load, and then what we showed you in the Hello World path is kind of like the most basic, easiest, here's how to do it, one way with RSS feeds. But there's a number of other things that are possible here. So what we saw was how it extracts the data from something, computes the embeddings, loads it into a vector database, but you can also remove things, especially if I just uploaded everything for this site name, if I want to delete just that site specifically and other things, there's other parameters and such you can do with that. So we have all of those things listed right here, kind of that's a similar path of what we just saw. Here's how to remove them as well, and just a number of other things. So that's another thing to check out at your leisure. The other thing I want you to know about is how to query the data in a sample front end. So what we did by default, let me hit this. So I showed you earlier in this demo something where this was this static string chat. So that's streaming is what it's for. Streaming chat HTML. So this is something that has a kind of a drop-down that has a number of data sources that we've been using here. As Guha said before, you can kind of switch between listing, where it just lists all the items back from that item catalog. There's a summarize one. This is what we just saw right here, where it kind of summarizes its answer up top and then lists the item. And then there's a generate option as well. And then we have a number of our the database providers that we have in the initial launch are all listed here, so you can switch back and forth between them as well.
Or send a PR to add a new one.
Yes, please send PRs to add new ones. The other thing I can show you is that we also have a very similar thing, just because we were sick of adding things to we actually need to what I want to do actually, Guha, is move the database over here and then be able to just retrieve automatically the site names is what we should do. But this all allows you to actually just type in. So if I wanted to do behind the tech, you can do that and not have to deal with the drop down. So that's debug.html if you want to play with that as well. But that's an easy PR. So those are some of the front ends and how you can use it. The other front end is this guy right here. So if you just load the website without going into any of the static individual pages, you'll get this interface.
Can I show something?
Yes, please. Yeah.
There is a thing that I want to show, which.
Of course.
Where is not this one. Debug? No.
Yeah, debug is right here. Sorry. Yeah. So I'm hitting the quadrant database right now, so that's not going to work because I don't have.
Oh, you didn't set it up.
Oh, actually, that should work. Sorry, if you pointed at NLWeb crawl, then yes, it should. Sorry.
Can we? Okay, you go ahead.
You
go ahead.
No, go for it. It's in the thing.
I'm not able to type in here.
What do you want me to type? Tell me what you want, and I'll type it.
The avocado query.
What?
The avocado query.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want me to do it?
No, I think.
Okay. So one of the things that's been, we've had a couple of really fun, queries that we've done over and over. You know how you get your favorite test cases when you're developing something and you try those things over and over and over again? We've had some really interesting ones that we've loved doing here. And Guha's family is big fans of avocado toast. So they are avocado toast nuts over in his house. However, his daughter is allergic to avocado. So he used this to be able to find alternatives.
Coming from a world of search, this is a nightmare query. Okay? Avocado, 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 don't give me things. What it gives you is it gives you alternatives to avocado for the toast. Okay? It's called avocado toast, but each of them. That is about how good as this thing can get out of the box without any tuning.
Yeah, and to be really clear, that's not actually avocado in there.
Yeah.
It's using
citrus phenols and so on and so forth. Okay, back to you. Sorry, I had to say
Yeah.
that.
Oh, no, not at all. That's awesome. Okay, so you saw a couple of different ways. There's also just, if you just go to localhost, it just gives you an ask kind of very basic thing where you can ask questions, and then what it will look for is whatever I have as my preferred endpoint in that configuration that's pointing at the vector database, it will just ask everything in that database by default. So right now I know I loaded the things on Kevin's podcast, so I can ask something like, what comics has Kevin mentioned on his podcast? And so since it's hitting everything, it actually hits Verge as well, because I have some data in there that might be relevant. And so the number one thing was Kevin did any of you guys like 𝗬𝗀𝗀𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧? I love 𝗬𝗬𝗧𝗧𝗧. It's so awesome. Yes. All right. We got some awesome folks in here. So Kevin hosted Randall Monroe on his podcast, and they had a great conversation talking about comics. So like that one comes back. And then there was also kind of side conversations in the conversation with like Neil Stephenson. They were talking about like graphic novels and some of the other kind of fiction stuff. So it brought up some like really, really cool examples here that are relevant. All right. One last thing, let me jump up to just the docs folder again and just make sure you see this. So I recommend you peruse kind of all of this at your leisure, because there's really great information we're trying to put together. And then if something isn't clear, like file an issue and then let's build more docs together, or write it up yourself, feel free. But some of the things I wanted to mention too is just deployment. So everything we've shown so far has been very like localhost. So if you wanted to have like your team try this out, like maybe you uploaded an RSS feed, of data that your company does, or some other structured data from your company, and you want people to be able to kick the tires. You can easily throw kind of that web front end, sample web front end that is not that glamorous, up just to give people a website to hit. So we did give you, there is instructions for how to do this on Azure. We hope to add other clouds as well, because nothing about this is Azure specific, as the king of open standards, web standards has said. This is all just thing, but here's just one way to do it if you wanted to deploy it to Azure. So we do have all of the instructions of how you can do it here. Just a simple AZ login, create your resource group, create an app service plan, create a web app, modify the appropriate environment variables, and then hit setup, and then this is using a zip deployment right here to just get it up there. And then we do have some troubleshooting stuff as well, and all kinds of other good stuff. And then here's how to create the model on Azure OpenAI if you would like to create that as your model endpoint. But as we said, you can swap out to be whatever model you want as well. All right, so I'm going to move back here.
When are we going to do the Chelsea?
We're going to do it right now, dude. We are back here. Okay, so we covered everything here. Oh, the one thing we didn't cover, I guess, but we don't need to go to the providers. We can skip over that. But there's another thing in the docs folder for providers. So if you want to add new models, or you want to add new vector databases, new retrieval mechanisms, you can actually go to this documentation, and it gives you a short checklist of like, here's the places in the code that you would want to change. So make sure your PR kind of covers these things. So that will hopefully make it easier for people to contribute. Again, I'm sure there's probably more we could add to the docs, so feel free to contribute too if we can make that better at all. All right, so the last thing that's really exciting is MCP integration. So what you can do is we did put together two things for you. We have a test sample, and we have a little demo that Chelsea is going to show. So while Chelsea is getting set up, I'll show you the sample code real quick on my machine. So whenever you set this thing up, we also have one of our other like static web pages is this MCP test service. So let me refresh this just to make sure I'm hitting the right data. And then this is just a really easy thing to just show, like, here's the calls. And so in this case, what I have is, let me change this, because again, I'm pointing to data that is thing. I could just do, are you ready to go? All right, I'll just switch over then. But this is really great. You can use this to send things back and forth, and that's awesome. And then let's move over to Chelsea.
The real test for whether MCP is working or not is whether one of the well-known MCP handling chatbots, which is Claude at this time, Claude Desktop, can actually talk to this.
The OG MCP client,
Yes.
the original, right?
Okay,
Claude Desktop.
so you set up this. Unfortunately, you do have to go set up something in the local thing. That's how Claude is right now. Hopefully, they'll make it without that, because Claude itself cannot do HTTP connections because it refuses to do that. So you have to add this little config stuff. And then after that, she's done that, and then go for it.
Yep, so you set up your configuration here. So this shows the desktop configuration that you can use. You guys, if you've done some MCP work, you're probably already familiar with how you can set things up in Claude Desktop. But this is just a quick example of something that you could replicate to be able to make the call. And so what we're doing here is we're just pointing using Python to the local host, to one of those endpoints that we set up. And then we're looking specifically for the MCP endpoint here.
And the idea is that it could, very soon, it'll be your remote MCP endpoint, which can do the aggregation across multiple MCP endpoints,
yes.
right? And so the NLWeb is set up much more like a DNS-like structure, where you ask your local, which can ask others, and so on.
So you see everything kind of set up there. And now if 𝗬𝗀𝗀𝗃 moves over to Claude Desktop, she can ask a question here. Now, you can see here what we have. If you select that, is you can see all of the tools that are available, MCP servers that this MCP client can connect to. So you can see that one of them that was available was the Ask NLWeb option here. So 𝗬𝗀𝗃 is asking about spicy, crunchy snacks, which was another one of Guha's favorite queries here. So we're asking specifically about that here. Notice that there is, so when the first time you do connect to any new MCP server, there is like a little responsible AI check in there. So it is kind of looking to see, hey, is that allowed? And we're going to say, yep, we wrote it. We're good with it. So now what it's going to do is you can see how it's actually reformatted the query. So did it do any reformatting? So sometimes what you'll see is that with the LLM, it can kind of reformat the query to add context there, and when it gets sent over. So in this case, I don't know, it wasn't any different.
And so over there, it says who is actually asking. Because of this nature, these are the sites that we have in the testing. Delish is one of the partners, CDC is one of the partners. I like spicy food, so I also grabbed Latin American recipes. And so it goes and asks, these says, okay, fine, I can ask these guys, goes ask them, pulls it back, and you have one endpoint which is acting as your sort of your aggregator.
Yeah. So you can see what it looks like in JSON, and then there is that pre-processing step where it's choosing like which of the sites are relevant to kind of
And there's another thing over here which, when you give the results back to Claude, you can specify certain constraints on, you need to do this and you need to do that. Claude sometimes ignores it, but more often than not, it does add it. And there we go. You can have the conversation and the ask, and it's like, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it'll just ignore the tools, et cetera. But, early days. But you can see this thing is really, it's doing MCP, so you don't need to worry about that plumbing of, and as more and more of the other tools are learning to do MCP, this thing is already there in the whole tool chain.
Yeah, so you get an MCP server kind of for free with NLWeb, which is amazing. Thank you so much, 𝗬𝗀𝗃. That was incredible. All right, so jumping back here, we just saw 𝗬𝗀𝗃's demo, which showed Claude Desktop, an MCP client, talking to an NLWeb MCP server, is what we just saw. And then if you want more information on that, we do actually have docs on how to set up Claude Desktop to be able to talk to your NLWeb endpoint, just to give you kind of the walkthrough that might be helpful in getting started. All right, so let's kind of summarize. We've been through a lot of information right now. Let's summarize like some of the stuff that is really exciting about what we are doing here. So number one, you're getting that power. Like we've had ChatGPT and kind of this generative AI phenomenon for 2-3 years now. But when I go to my local grocery store and I search for green beans, it still returns like refried beans and other things that are just completely not contextually relevant, right? So what we're doing here is trying to bring that power of what we're getting with large language models into individual websites so that you as a developer can kind of be able to recreate that experience on your own. As Guha said, it searches over your item catalog, so you always know it's going to retrieve something that you listed. It's going to retrieve one of the podcasts from his collection. It's going to retrieve some of the inventory. If you're a retail store, your item catalog, it's going to come from there. So that can help a lot. So I'm not saying it's hallucination-free because the model part of it could do something, but it always will return something that is from your item catalog, which is very compelling. As we said, this is a completely open standard. So you can switch out the LLM, you can switch out the embedding model that's creating the embeddings, you can switch out the retrieval mechanism, Azure AI Search, and some of the other great vector databases there. And then we've given you tools here to be able, you saw that really easy DB load, and then we took an RSS feed, and then bam, it was just in there so easily. So we have nice tools to help you import your structured data. The other demo that Kevin did this morning at the keynote was using GitHub data. So I do have a demos folder as well in this repo, and the code that we use to extract data from the GitHub repo is actually sitting there. So you can feel free to replicate that on your own GitHub repos if you wanted to be
one thing I should point out, both the RSS case and GitHub case, all those loaders are doing is taking these items, reformatting them into schema.org, because schema.org is very well understood by the LLMs. You can just give it natively to them, and then creating the catalog out of that. And so you can write tools for pretty much anything, and then we can also extend schema.org as we need to.
Awesome. And then the final thing that is super exciting about this is it's not just websites, you guys. Because of that MCP server that we're giving you along with this, you're making the whole thing agent compatible. So agents can talk to your website's data as well. So now you've just kind of unlocked this ticket into the broader agent ecosystem and made your website able to be able to interact with agents in an extremely compelling way. So that is super exciting as a developer. We do want to come at this very humbly. As Guha said at the beginning, the code, there will be bugs, folks. The code repo is not perfect, but we're really excited to all go on this journey together.
And even the protocols and so on, these are very, very early days. The first time I played with the web, mid-93, it didn't have images, because Tim Beale didn't think scientific papers needed to have images in line. It was links to images elsewhere that you loaded one image at a time. When I actually started working on browsers, et cetera, collaborating with Netscape, the only way of formatting things was table. There was no style sheets. And then my dear friend Brendan Ike came up with JavaScript, and we have a long ways to go, but we got to start. So
yes. Very good. All right, so we're very excited to all go on this journey together. Questions? Yes, sir. I think would you mind speaking into the microphone, because that way the people online will be able to hear a little bit better too.
Yeah, this is super exciting.
Yeah.
So question on, so you said that so with the question, I saw that you gave a very complete question, and some negation expression in that question as well. So can you elaborate on how the question was translated into, you said, 40, 50 different kind of calls to
that's a long one. There's a document in the README folder, in the document folder called Life of a Query. Okay. I wrote it in sort of, when a person enters Google, they go through this thing called the Life of a Query lecture. And so we figured we should have one of those things over here. Life of a chat query, it tells you step by step how all this decomposition takes place.
Thank you. Maybe a small quick on that. So I see the example on the avocado.
Yeah.
But I still see the answer with avocado there. I mean, you say that.
That just so happens to be the case that it tries to, the description is generated by the LLM over there. So that's why it refers to avocado in order to, because you mentioned.
You're talking about the summarize mode, right? That when we selected
No, the description there has avocado. Yeah.
Got it. Yep. Yes, that was good.
Hello, thank you. Great natural language web, being able to search with human interaction. The input seems like it's very valuable. The output coming from what you said was RAG would produce hallucinations. I agree. But then you also stated that you could get into a position where a hallucination wouldn't happen. Could you clarify that?
Sure. I'm happy to clarify that. Every single item that it gives you is a thing where it gives you back a reference to you give it a database.
Yeah.
And every single item it gives you has a reference to an item in the database.
So
So
it's never going to add. So if I asked for 50 of something where there was only 20, it's not going to add 30.
Yeah, and it'll tell you, or if there's none, it'll tell you, I don't know. It'll never make up the, if you ask it for a hotel in Transylvania, which has, pigs flying on top, whatever, something, it won't make up. It doesn't have. And every one of the things that you have, you can verify that it does indeed exist. It could give you irrelevant, like Google, any search, Bing search, Google search, right? When it gives you URLs, you know that at some point at least that URL existed.
Is that a post-processing step
No, it's just the way the architecture is.
within the model?
It's not, you should read the, I don't want to get into the details right here.
Okay.
The way it happens is that it's not take a whole bunch of data, dump it into the model, and yay model, please do the right thing for me. What it treats the model as is an incredibly smart oracle where it gives it lots of fine-grained tasks.
Okay.
Tell me about this, tell me about this. The core idea is it's something which I call mixed mode programming, which is that you can write a traditional program where you have absolute fine control over what it's doing. But all the knowledge comes from you. Or you can hand it over to an LLM where you lose that control, but you gain that knowledge. This mode of programming is like, I'm going to keep the control, damn it,
Okay.
but make lots of calls where I can rely on that knowledge.
A lot of upfront work to get that done, or is it?
That's done, you're here. That's the initial implementation rather than a theory. You can carry on and you can change the prompt and you can do this and you can do that, you can add it. We needed to, in order to be taken seriously as a replacement for a search, you can't go to a retailer and say 1 in 1,000 products is going to be made up. Right? No, seriously, you can't. And so it has to have that guarantee. And at the same time, you can ask it, we don't want to share demos with partners who have not yet gone this thing. You can ask it fairly complicated things like give me a jacket that will work in. And let me give you an example of something. Somebody was was giving a demo to one of the senior people at Microsoft, and he was like, there's a place called Wellington in New Zealand, it's capital of New Zealand. Give me a jacket, and there's a place called Wellington in Canada. Give me a winter jacket that would be good for Wellington, Canada, gives you something. Wellington, New Zealand, gives you different things. And then he said, now let me try this. Wellington, Tamil Nadu. There's a place called Wellington in Tamil Nadu in India. Completely different weather, right? And I happen to know that because my wife used to live there. And it does the right thing. Where the hell does that come from? It comes knowledge in the LLM in terms of the ranking. And this is really, really difficult for a retailer to go put all of that stuff in. And this gives them a way of drawing on that knowledge in order to bring stuff.
Thank you.
So it's a question for Guha. Being, how close you were to some of these sort of these internet protocols that have become the backbone of the internet as we know it today, and seeing them in their early days, I'd love to hear you talk about what your future vision, down the road 5-10 years for this protocol, what that looks like.
Anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen in 10 years, don't believe them. I don't know.
You don't have to know. I just want to hear what you think.
My future hope, I'll tell you my desire, is there's N million people just assuming it's there. When you go to a site and you don't find you can talk to it, right? You're annoyed. One of my best moments is I run a site, guha.com, which has 4 pages, and I get a real chuckle when I get spam mail offering to help me put schema.org on that. So I want that. I mean, really, look, I don't know where people get, like, every day somebody tells me, can you do this? And I stop saying no because there is some way of somebody will find out for doing this. So I don't know. My vision is that you tell me what the next thing is, really.
Thank you.
Hello. So my question is kind of quick. I was just wondering if you can put this on top of a SQL database, and so you can.
Yeah.
Is there some
I
documentation
think
for
the
that?
quadrant thing is actually running on top of SQLite.
Oh, it is. Okay. Awesome. Is there some documentation on that?
No. Why don't you ask at the quadrant people? They're submitting their PRs.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
We have 30 seconds left. Does anyone have any final questions? Or people just want to like form a line to get a selfie taken with
No,
Guha?
no.
Yes.
With you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.